My name is Bjorn Bieler. I'm the International Coordinator for IPEN, which is the International Pollutants Elimination Network. Simply, our mission in IPEN is a toxic-free future for all. We are a global network who've been working for many years to work with decision makers, scientists, and many governments to eliminate persistent organic pollutants, which we'll be talking about today. What's very important is that 24 years ago, governments from around the world adopted the Stockholm Convention, which was focused on eliminating these persistent organic pollutants. And today we're going to be talking about the realities of this, different stories and situations around the world and the science. So we're very pleased to have our co-hosts for this event. We have a large speaker list. So with that, I'm going to jump in very quickly into some of the science with Dr. Jean Conry, who is joining us online from FIGO. And with that, Dr. Conry, please begin with the science, and then after this, we'll go into the Arctic and go into Q&A. So, Dr. Conry, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Honored guests, distinguished scientists, and advocates for global health, I'm honored to be with you to discuss what I believe is our most compelling role: to invest in the health of women, children, families, and our futures by urgently reducing exposures to known and potential chemicals in our environment. Thank you, Pamela Miller, for the International Pollutants Elimination Network, and Maureen Swanson, the Director of Environmental Risk Reduction and Project Tender, targeting environmental neurodevelopmental risks. Project Tender is an alliance of 50 leading scientists, health professionals, and advocates working to protect children from toxic chemicals and pollutants that harm brain development. We do this with a focus on environmental impacts on preconception, pregnancy, and children's health. I've always maintained that when we invest in women and empower women, we invest in our futures most effectively. Who better to optimize their health for future pregnancies, in active preparation for pregnancy, or for an existing pregnancy? Who better to minimize any adverse health effects to a fetus, a child, or an adolescent than mom? Who better to provide advice and counseling for friends and family than mom? Of course, I say this as an OBGYN who has devoted my life to improving women's health and well-being, but I've seen women as caregivers, unifiers, the guiding force in so many lives that I have become more and more vocal about the environment as I've led global organizations in the awareness of environmental health. I focused on women in leadership, on women leading some changes in their families, and in healthcare professionals becoming the leaders in environmental movements. Today, we are here as this part of the Stockholm Convention, and I'm going to reference the US EPA site. Persistent organic pollutants are toxic chemicals that adversely affect human health and the environment around the world. Because they can be transported by wind and water, most persistent organic pollutants generated in one country can and do affect people and wildlife far from where they're used and released. They persist for long periods in time and can accumulate and pass from one species to the next through the food chain. That wording is still on the USA website today. Unfortunately, as you know here in the room, the United States signed but is one of only 4 nations that failed to ratify, joining Israel, Haiti, and Malaysia. However, this does not prevent the very dedicated scientists and advocates in the United States from providing intensive involvement in research translation, education, and advocacy. Today, I'll describe some of the science, how medical organizations are stepping forward, and conclude where the science needs to take us. So what is the science? Well, as I speak as an OBGYN, a physician representing our most vulnerable populations, a pregnant woman, her fetus, and the child she births, if we can implement decisions that wholly protect this mother and her fetus, then we will have implemented decisions that protect our entire population. When you restrict chemicals that have the potential to harm the world's most vulnerable, we have protected us all. What I know, exposures to toxic chemicals in our air, water, food, soil, and consumer products are widespread. They begin in utero. The fetus, infant, and young children are especially vulnerable to harms because their bodies and brains are rapidly developing. Chemicals can interfere with sensitive biological processes during these critical periods. It is before, during, and after pregnancy where we can have the most important impact on children's health and maternal health. We can prevent pregnancy losses, stillbirths, preterm births, birth defects, cancer, chronic diseases, and other complications if we control these environmental toxicants. In a 2011 analysis of the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention biomonitoring data, we found 90% of pregnant women in the United States had detectable levels of 62 chemicals in their bodies out of 163 that were assessed. These are chemicals like PFAS, PBDE, phthalates. All of them are recognized by our own NIH to cause adverse pregnancy outcomes and children's defects. In fact, recent research has shown that one item recommended for all pregnant women is almost always contaminated with toxics. That's right. Research on prenatal vitamins shows that almost every brand tested in every study that's taken place for the last several years shows mercury, arsenic, cadmium, and pesticides. Many of these chemicals cross the placenta and are found in cord blood and fetal tissues. The International Federation of Gynecology and Obstetrics released a series of statements. In 2015, they adopted guidance on reproductive health impacts on exposure to toxic environmental chemicals protect women and children. In 2019, FIGO stated that global health should be our guiding light, and they recommended that glyphosate exposure to populations end with a full global phase-out. And in 2023, FIGO stated that formal global regulatory environment should be put in place with post-production testing programs that analyzes, to begin with, vitamins, but other products too, to make sure that chemicals should not be found in products that are being marketed or consumed during pregnancy, and in fact, by all women. And then it's Project Tender that stated, it is most timely that today, as an organization devoted to maternal and child health, we are in support of listing chlorpyrifos as a persistent organic pollutant. Chlorpyrifos is an organophosphate pesticide, a chemical class comprised of nerve agents that inhibit neurodevelopmental processes and adversely impact later neurologic function. These pesticides are associated with symptoms or diagnoses of ADHD and autism. One study in California found children born to pregnant women living near agricultural fields where chlorpyrifos has been applied had a 60% greater likelihood of developing autism than children of pregnant women who were not so exposed. So to effect change, we must first overcome massive global regulation hurdles in global chemical regulation, and second, encourage healthcare leadership to advocate for environmental health awareness and behavioral change. So where is the future taking us? Well, I'd love to say that there's a recognition of environmental impacts driving healthcare, but that's not the case. I'm part of a global initiative, P2I, Preconception to Infancy, with a focus on environmental exposures across the lifespan that unites all of us here today. P2I advocates for a world where products must be certified as safe and free of potentially toxic chemicals through post-production testing. Today, we rely on awareness of patients. We rely on their self-advocacy. We rely on manufacturers' labeling that states whether present a product has chemicals or toxicants in them, and not whether that label is in fact correct. Instead, we must be proactive. Products should undergo post-production analysis so we know what clean truly is and that they are clean. We must look at proactive body burden measurements in our patients to guide them. Our time has arrived. Advocacy is our first important step. Knowledge is power. Change relies on awareness of risk, ease of change, and the recognition of the need to change. Knowing risks and acting upon them can change this world. Thank you for the important work that you're doing. It is essential for global health and all of our futures. I'll turn the program over to you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Connery. Not only are you a top scientist who are bringing evidence to the table about exposure to women, mothers, and children, you're also the past president of FIGO, and that's just as a matter of how important this is, that many larger institutions are looking at this and beginning to move this forward. And we're looking at how this is really science to policy right here in Geneva to try to eliminate these chemicals. Now we're going to broaden the lens a little bit and look at the Arctic And we're going to look at some of the problems with this chemical by chemical approach as we open up a little bit more about the class of chlorinated paraffins. Some have been added, but we're going slowly, as was just said by the doctor. With there, I'd like to introduce Pam Miller, the co-chair of the IPEN network, also the executive director of an Alaska and Arctic-based group called ACAD. Pam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Bjorn, and colleagues and friends. So happy that we could all come together tonight to focus on a very important topic, because this is not an abstract issue for this BRS COP, and that's protecting the health of children and future generations. So, and I want to thank Dr. Conry from the bottom of my heart for joining us this evening as well. And I'm very pleased to introduce my colleagues. Jasmine Gemawak is going to share this presentation with me. She's the Water Quality and Community Health Protection Coordinator. And I'd also like to introduce Dr. Samari Sigwadat Medina. She's the Environmental Health Director with Alaska Community Action on Toxics, and we all work together to put this presentation together. This is just very briefly about our organization that really exists to protect health and human rights. We believe everyone has the right to clean air, clean water, and toxic-free food. And you can see some of the ways that we do our work: community-based research, outreach, education, community organizing, and advocacy. And we work to achieve policy change at all levels, really, because we know that these chemicals don't respect political boundaries, and the Arctic is a hemispheric sink for persistent chemicals that come in on wind and ocean currents. This is our elder and very knowledgeable community health worker who was based in the community of Savunga. And we honor her because she was the one that really witnessed the health disparities resulting from military contamination, such as PCBs and other persistent chemicals on Sivukak, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. This is a map of Alaska. Because of our strategic location in the Arctic and proximity to Russia, we have over 2,000 toxic waste sites, many of them military-derived waste sites because of the proximity to Russia and beginning in Cold War times and extending into present times. But this is a map of the contaminated sites that we created. And again, the Arctic is a hemispheric sink for contaminants that rise on wind and ocean currents and move into the Arctic region, where they accumulate in the bodies of fish, wildlife, and people. And Arctic indigenous peoples have some of the highest concentrations of these persistent and toxic chemicals of any population on Earth. And because climate warming is happening at such a rapid rate in the Arctic, about 4 times faster than the rest of the planet, this really exacerbates the problem of the mobilization and transport of chemicals into the Arctic. I'm just going to touch briefly on this since we're spending the entire week talking about these chemicals, and Dr. Conry talked about chlorpyrifos, very serious neurotoxicant, and we know that it's highly toxic, especially to the developing brains of children. Medium chain chlorinated paraffins, again, developmental toxicants, and they're associated with a range of health effects. And we know that children are always more vulnerable to exposure to these chemicals. And these MCCPs are found in a wide range of products, including children's toys, as you can see here in the slide. Long chain perfluorocarboxylic acids, or PFCAs. Again, these are also developmental toxicants and associated with a range of adverse human health effects. These are passed from mother to child through the placenta and breast milk. So again, a very concerning substance, and we're really calling on a global ban with no exemptions for all of these chemicals.
And so the woman in the middle is my great-grandmother, Marian Esther Alcon, and today I wanted to share her story with you. She was born in 1935 at the old site near Shaktoolik, Alaska. She was a mother to 8 children. She was a community health aide, and she was a culture bearer. She was born into a Yupik world, and in her lifetime, in her 86 years of life, she watched her whole world change. So in the 1930s, the Bureau of Indian Affairs had built their school on this sand spit that you see here right there. And the BIA put it there because it was a convenient location for them. And so they told residents at the Shaktoolik old site that they needed to move to this new location for their kids to go to school, or they would take their kids away. And so they were forced to relocate to this spot. And for most of the Norton Sound region, the BIA and the church, hand in hand, had forcibly taken away our culture, our language, and our dance, which is a part of our culture. And my grandma Darla, who is Marion's daughter, she asked her one day if she could teach her to speak her Yupik language. And my grandma had watched her speak with her friends and her cousins, laughing in Yupik, and she wanted to learn the language. But my grandma told her, never speak Yupik in my home. And she threw her Yupik language book in the garbage can. And this was because my great grandma Marion was beaten when she spoke her language in school. And so that's just to show how our language and our culture has been stripped from us. And although we do not have our language, we do have our traditional foods. And so here's a photo just showing a few of the traditional foods that we gather throughout the year. This is all throughout the year, all of the seasons. We're always out on the land gathering our fish, our berries, our whale. And so to us, this is the most healthy diet that we could possibly consume. We have a very diverse diet of beluga whale. We have king salmon. We have greens soaked in seal oil. We have blueberries and cloudberries. It's all very rich in vitamins and essential nutrition that we need to survive in the Arctic. And so my grandma Darla at home right now, she has 4 freezers just to keep up with all of the food that we need to feed our family. And the fresh produce, like a lot of the ingredients you have in your salads today, a lot of that fresh produce, by the time it gets to where we live, it's usually rotten because it takes so long to get to where we live. And it's also very expensive, which is why we are so reliant on our traditional foods. And so Shaktoolik is one of the top 4 villages in Alaska that is in imminent risk of destruction. Every year we are worried every fall because in the fall we have such intense fall storms. Due to the warm ocean currents, we do not have ocean ice anymore. The ocean ice usually protects our land from being eroded by the storms. But due to climate change, our houses are falling into the ocean. We're losing historical sites. And the lack of ice, it also makes it very dangerous for us to hunt our traditional foods. And so our way of life is being threatened by climate change and these dangerous chemicals. And so my great grandma Marion, she passed away at 86 years old, and in her lifetime, she watched everything change. Our traditional food is no longer free from contamination. The long-range transport of persistent chemicals in the Arctic are silently poisoning our people. Our children are vulnerable, and it shows in our test scores. It shows in the prevalence of suicide. Suicide is happening in children younger and younger. And substance abuse, domestic violence, there's all of this chain reaction of factors going against us. And so these chemicals, they are just silently poisoning us. And we already have so much going against us with colonization. And at this time, we are forced to relocate again after the school forced them to move here. Now climate change is making us move again. And so it's a very difficult situation for people of Shaktoolik. And then, and this is just showing permafrost thaw in Alaska. So permafrost is frozen tundra. And once it's disturbed, once it's melted, it can never be frozen again. And a lot of our infrastructure, it's sitting on top of this permafrost. So the permafrost is being melted by climate change, and that is what is eroding. And huge chunks of our land are falling straight into the ocean, and there's nothing we could do to reverse it or stop it. And we rely on all of our infrastructure. This is how we go to school. This is how we see the doctor. This is how we travel. And so our way of life is being threatened by these chemicals and the climate of our world right now.
I'm going to speak just briefly about some of our community-based research on Sivokak, which is located in the northern Bering Sea, because this is a project called Protecting Future Generations, and we've measured contaminant levels in most of the traditional foods of the Yupik people of Sivokak, as well as in the blood serum of people. And coming back to the military sites, there were two major bases on Sivokak, a large source of contamination of things like PCBs, chlorinated pesticides, as well as heavy metals and fuels. The military left all of this in place and displaced this community at Northeast Cape that was a community, and the process that you see here are of children who died because of exposure to toxic chemicals at the site and miscarriages that resulted from those exposures. These are some of the health disparities that we've witnessed and documented, including cancers and endocrine disrupting chemicals and developmental and learning disabilities. The children that you see there by the stream are collecting fish samples because we're trying to document the nature and extent of contamination, because the military has kept much of this secret. This is a slide of the blood serum levels of PCBs in the people of Sivokak. And you can see that the people of Sivokak have much higher levels, 6 to 9 times higher levels of PCBs in their blood than people that have PCBs, an average person in the lower 48 of the United States. And that's because of global transport. But the middle bar shows the elevation of PCBs in the blood of people whose families have close ties with Northeast Cape, the military site. These are some of the results. We've done PCB analyses of all of the traditional foods, including plants, invertebrates, fish, and marine mammals. And the highest levels are found in the blubber of seals, walrus, and whales, which are very critical to the diet. And these levels are high enough to warrant cancer advisories, according to fish advisories established by the US EPA. So too high to be safe. And I mentioned we've done blood serum testing, and so we found extensive exposure to chemicals such as flame retardants, the PBDEs, flame retardants, polybrominated diphenyl ethers, and PFAS chemicals. And I just want to make a note here that these PFAS chemicals, PFNA and PFUNDA, are long chain PFAS. So these are being found in the Arctic, even though they are not produced and very little used there. And these levels of PBDEs and the PFAS chemicals are linked with endocrine disruption, thyroid and reproductive harm to people. The military site was built at the city village site of Gamble, and the school where about 200 children attend is built on top of this military toxic waste site. So we're very concerned about the volatilization of chemicals. In the lake there is Troutman Lake, heavily contaminated with both PFAS and flame retardants. This is the state of many of the schools in Alaska, largely because they're not receiving the funding they need, but a lot of this infrastructure damages result from permafrost melting that Jasmine spoke about. But health hazards include these things: black mold, PCBs, asbestos, sewage, lead, and other problems. These are condemnable buildings, but yet they're being used by the schools. We have a large problem with adverse birth outcomes in rural communities in Alaska in particular, because of open burning, which of course releases dioxins and furans and other chemicals, and reproductive health problems among the mothers and the children. So adverse birth outcomes as well as reproductive harm to the women and children. And most of those open burn sites are located upwind from the communities and schools, and children play in and around these places, resulting in harmful exposures. I just want to mention briefly, this is a report that we did in advance of the last negotiation session in Ottawa, of the plastics treaty. And this shows that the Arctic is not only a hemispheric sink for chemicals, but it's a hemispheric sink for microplastics. And the microplastics then convey chemicals into these remote regions. And now the Arctic Ocean is the ocean basin that contains the highest concentrations of microplastics. PFAS in Alaska, because again, we're a very light dependent state because most of our communities are not linked to a road system. So we have many airports, we have many military sites. And so the last assessment by our Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation showed that we have 469 sites contaminated by PFAS in soil and water. Some of these around the state are the drinking water is contaminated that serve the communities as well as the schools in many of these remote communities. We do organizing with youth, women, and elders and workshops to advance health and human rights, and this is a big part of our work. I just want to remind us all again about the language in the preamble of the Stockholm Convention, because it's really about protecting women and children and future generations. And we worked very hard to get the language in the preamble of the convention that recognizes the particular vulnerability of Arctic indigenous peoples, again, because of that phenomenon of global distillation. And this is Vaiwahi, our colleague who's testifying before the Stockholm Convention in a plenary session, reminding people that, again, this is not an abstract issue. These chemicals are passed from mother to child. They affect the ability of children to learn and grow in a healthy way. And I won't spend too much time on the slide, but just to look at the last quote there, people are not just exposed to one chemical. And this is one of our board members. We don't just eat one chemical, we eat the whole fish. So there are synergistic and cumulative effects. And as Jasmine noted, there are issues around intergenerational harm and colonialism. So we don't work on toxic chemicals alone. We have to have a holistic approach to these issues. And this is why we're doing this work, to protect the health of our children and future generations. And I thank you.
Thank you very much, Pam and Jasmine, for sharing with that. I mean, the theme here we're looking at is make visible the invisible. Science makes it visible. These stories of Arctic indigenous peoples make it visible. I think what you just saw is some of the reality. These are chemicals that are produced thousands of miles away from what you've just learned about the impacts. I was shocked in this reality. 45% of the births are premature. 45% of the births, that is intergenerational harm. So when we look at that, we have to think about how do we move this into gear? How do we get the Stockholm Convention that was agreed to 24 years ago to move forward? They're still discussing PCB destruction. They're still discussing right now in the halls, will they fund this? This is one of the first POPs listed of the original 12, and now it's still moving so slowly. How do we speed that up? Everyone's received a lot of information right now. I'm gonna open up just for short, quick comments or questions from the floor before we go to the next part. And I think I'm looking at the special rapporteur who had a question. I'll give to you the floor for a quick question to the panel, a rapid response, and then one more question. I think I had the youth group had a question, then we'll go to the next part. So please. And then please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Thank you, Bjorn. Marcos Orellana, I'm the UN Special Rapporteur on Toxics and Human Rights. Thank you so much for the presentations that you've made and also for the work that you do. I had a brief question in relation to the Stockholm Conventions and its criteria. And at some point, you spoke about classes of chemicals, and in a way, POPs can be considered a class of chemicals, but their listing is still one by one. What will it take for the Stockholm Convention to begin treating chemicals as a class so that it can be made more effective in dealing with threats associated with persistent organic pollutants? Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for that question. I think it's so critical, and we've been calling for efforts through the Stockholm Convention, other chemical treaties to address these issues as a class, to address PFAS as a class, for example, because as you know, they share many similar physical properties and have similar health effects, but it is moving so slowly. But I am encouraged that we are dealing with at least subclasses of chemicals here, the MCCPs and the long chain perfluorocarboxylic acids. But I think, as Bjorn said, things are moving so slowly, and we do need to address these chemicals as a class, and we need to find a way to do that. And they are all associated with harm. Many of these PCBs really is a class of chemicals as well. So and dioxins and furans. So we need to move much more quickly. It's so painfully slow to have to deal with things on a chemical by chemical basis.
I have another question I had from the youth. Do they still have the question before I go to the next part, please? And please speak loud.
Thank you for introduction to show us how research are contributing to show that the chemicals which are produced in the which harms or helps how research or help us to know what is. We thank you for the tasks. As my name is Dimitri Zivodo from Benin, and I'm here from the Youth and Children International, mainly chemical waste and chemical youth platform. My question is that do you think that the commission, the Stockholm Convention, through its collaboration with the MEAS outside can be useful for us?
I'll repeat that. Sorry. Please. It's French is native language. My apologies.
That's great.
The question was, do you think it'll be useful for the Stockholm Convention to be strengthened through collaboration with other MEs outside of the Basel and Rotterdam Convention, like the Hong Kong Convention or any other, the upcoming INC treaty? Is that a
Very clear, very clear. Great question. I think that I look to the panel. Sorry. Yes, please. I'll look to you. Oh, me. Oh, sure. I've been, if it's okay to, I think the question that we're looking at is many more chemicals are being produced every day than before. When I was born, there were only so many chemical types being produced, and the volume is much different than we are looking at today. And so the Stockholm Convention looks at persistent organic pollutants. The INCs, or the plastics treaty conversation that we're looking at right now, is how is that treaty going to address all the chemicals related to plastics? And there's more. And simply, if we were to look at that plastics treaty, how do we look at endocrine disrupting chemicals that are non-persistent organic pollutants, but that are EDCs, endocrine disrupting chemicals that harm, as we saw there, impacts to women, mothers, and children? So how do we address that problem more broadly? I think the simple question is, what did we learn from the Stockholm Convention and the other conventions? And how might these other conventions or treaties be more effective? And we're going so slow while the industry is moving so fast. And most shockingly is the transition of oil and gas from the energy markets into the material markets, which is producing more plastics, more petrochemicals, and so many of these pops that we're looking at are petrochemical materials. That means oil and gas are making these pops. So we have to have synergies between the two. I hope that addresses your question. And if we have more, we can speak more in the hallways. But yes, this should not be silent, and this is moving so slow. I would just beg every delegation to think, how do we get controls on EDCs that are in plastics? That would be a major step. And that's a classification instead of a one by one. With that, if I may, I want to move us back to other parts of the world. We're going to move into Africa, and we're going to, in the theme, we're going to look at very practically the impacts of persistent organic pollutants in children's products in Africa. I have here Gilbert Coepo from the Center, oh, it's in French, but I'll call CREPIT, based in Cameroon. Due to time, I'm going to pass the floor to you, Gilbert, to walk us through the information you have for the audience.
Thank you, Guillaume, for giving me the opportunity to present my mandate in this side event about the data from Africa. I am the executive director of CRES at UCA. When I received this mandate, I really thought about my first endeavor on chemical in product issue that was lead in pen. When I studied in Cameroon, people didn't believe how can lead pass from pen to children, because children are always vulnerable people. And it was difficult to show it. And when we had the opportunity to do blood lead testing, the results show that 86% of the people that we test have blood lead level above the recommended value that was at the time 5 micrograms per deciliter. Today it is 3.5. So if we return to the same cohort of population, all of them, they will be poisoned by lead. So just to let you know that it is important that we try to make invisible visible. That is the theme of this thing. And doing it is through practical or technical measure that the civil society or stakeholder on this MEA can contribute. And this is what we are contributed through IPEN. And I'm very proud to say that. And thank you, Mr. International Coordinator, for always providing the means for us to prove the reality and to inform our campaign. Next. Yes, here is next. Yeah, no, yes, we sample some. Next. Your job, man. Yes, we sample some children pool in Africa, in 7 countries, African countries, and then you can see the image here. I will not go into that one and try to analyze what is the chemical or POP indeed. And the idea was to try to convince negotiators that people are recycling plastic that contain flame retardant used in some specific application like electronic and electric equipment into more sensitive use like toy. That was try to make that evidence and prove that it is something that we should maybe provide to negotiators to convince them to close the loop of recycling for some of this material that contain hazardous material like pulp. Let's go. Next. And when we sample it, we obtain such kind of result. This maybe this is PowerPoint and something went wrong, but these red lines have been here like at 50 ppm. 50 ppm is the low pop content level that was adopted for the pop, brominate flame retardant pop. So on the between the Basel Convention and the Stockholm Convention that try to hit that kind of data of discussion. And you can see that these are the children toys, for instance here. You see the concentration of pop in that one are very high, be above the low pop content. Low pop content is the concentration above which the waste should be considered as pop waste and treated according to the technical guideline of the Basel Convention. So, and become hazardous waste. Below, they can be treated as normal waste. So you can see that even there are many equipment, but you can see toys that have concentration and that go up to maybe 400 ppm. The unit, I mean microgram per kilogram here, so don't worry about the zeros. So it is just 500 ppm. That is 100 times higher than the low pop content. value. This is the data from Cameroon, and you can see from Ethiopia, we have the same thing. The higher it can go to up to 650 ppm in Gabon next. So, and we have Morocco, we have Tunisia, and the story is the same. So, and the finding is that the flame retardant chemical that are used in plastic, that is specific application, are being recycled into some new product that are very sensitive where people, children are exposed. And science has shown that in this, during the use of this tool or toys, the chemical can migrate from the tool to the hand of the children and expose him. I'm seeing people asking, what is the evidence that this is exposing really children? That means these chemicals are passing from toys to children. And this reminds me my story about lead pen, and you can see the connection. Until we test, nobody will agree or will believe on us. But we are losing time because the time we have all the equipment to test and to prove it, it may be late. And we heard from a great scientist, Jean Conre, now from Mexico, who taught all about the health implication of exposure, particularly children, to this pop. They can lead to cancer. Now it is proved that it is leading to maybe infertility. And infertility is very sensitive and is touching already on our survival, or human survival. So we should take it seriously when we are here. And when a few minutes ago, I was in the room, we were trying to list chlorpyrifos, and people are coming with exemption. At the end of the day, all the use are now exempt. So there will be an inscription, but without effect, because the intention will have no effect of what we intend to really obtain. So this is a kind of thing that we should be mindful that our own survival is at stake, and we are aware of the power of that are behind all this. But as human, maybe sometimes we should accept to make some sacrifice, because it may be late the time we wake up, but as we are now, we are trying to raise the bacon, and we hope all the delegates here will have it, and we have the opportunity to change the thing. This is the moment, and to think about ourselves, about our future. 50 years ago, we have no problem of this one, because we are bringing new chemicals into the nature that have no antidote, and we have no solution. So this is the interpellation that we are contributing to make invisible visible. Nobody knew about all these long names. I will not go through them. They are complicated, but machine can identify them and make them visible. Because when you saw the tool, there's no labeling telling you that there are chemical inside. But when we put it in the machine reads it. This is really the theme of this book, making invisible visible. I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Gilbert. And that is quite shocking, though. Banned toxic chemicals in the Stockholm Convention showing up in new toys in African children's environment. Hazardous waste being put into toys, sold brand new on the market. Parents not having any idea, and you have to test them to find those results. We are reacting right now. And these are very challenging situations. And for that, I'm so pleased that we've got two government representatives here to share their experience in Uruguay, because this is challenging and there's other realities that everyone's trying to deal with. First, I will begin with Juan Miguel Cuna from the Philippines, and I'll just give the floor to you to share.
Thank you very much, Bjorn. First of all, allow me to, I'm Juan Miguel Cuna. I'm Undersecretary for the Department of Environment and Natural Resources in the Philippines. I'd like to thank IPEN for giving us this opportunity to share an experience we've had in the Philippines in addressing toxic chemicals. So basically, this project that we had in the Philippines is transforming an informal recycling practice to a registered treatment, storage, and disposal facility. So this is what we call a TSD facility. So prior to the intervention of the government with this project, informal recycling of e-waste is prevalent everywhere, particularly in highly urbanized areas. And informal waste recyclers collect e-waste from households and dump sites to recover whatever they can. So a lot of the informal settlers rely are very dependent on the collection of waste electrical and electronic equipment. So women and children in the communities are very much exposed to POPs and other chemicals of concern like lead. A lot of young people at an early age try to help their families in earning income by collecting these e-wastes. Many of these equipment are thrown in alleys and water bodies, sometimes contaminating the water. So the government, with the help of Jeff, and it's a UNIDO project, they were our development partners, we're very thankful, partnered with us, along with a local NGO, the Eco Waste Coalition, to link with the communities engaged in the recycling and dismantling of these e-waste. We realized that the government alone would have difficulty in convincing the communities practicing this to join the program. So again, we're thankful to Eco Waste Coalition because they were able to help us convince the communities that this is the way to go. So the government partnered with an existing TSD, the Integrated Recycling Industries Philippines, a local registered TSD, to design a TSD facility particularly for dismantling electronic waste. And they also helped develop the training module to train the community dismantlers. The project the project did not stop there. They assisted the community in obtaining the different government permits. So what we have under the Environmental Management Bureau, you register as a TSD, a treatment, storage, and disposal facility. So a TSD registration certificate is issued to you, and for any form of transport that you transport the e-waste, the vehicles undergo a process also of inspection and to ensure that these vehicles are built properly to transport this e-waste, and they're registered. The transporter registration certificates are issued. The project also developed a business plan. I think this is important because when the dismantlers were doing their activities backyard, whatever they recover, they would sell, and most of the time they would be shortchanged. And with the business plan being prepared for them, this allowed them to get more value for whatever they would recover. And this would also make the facility more sustainable and the operation steady. So today, these facilities do not employ children anymore. So the project was able to educate them that I think the exposure to children of this kind of chemicals and waste would not be in their best interest. So, but I think it's important that the project was able to provide the proper tools and personal protective equipment, and they were taught how to come up with a system that would be environmentally sound in their dismantling. So we're also very thankful for this to the Stockholm Convention because, of course, the project was able to obtain guidance through the provisions of the Stockholm Convention on how we would be able to come up with a project that would certainly help address the women and children health concerns in the activity that was being done in the past as a backyard activity which came into the fold of the government and was properly registered, and now is being replicated in other areas aside from the 4 initial pilot sites. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you for sharing that, Juan. It's so important to highlight the challenges that people need livelihoods. People need to get income to survive. And what you showed there was the ability to work with civil society and the government and make direct interventions for a safer environment. And you're just looking at this waste is not going to go away. How do we protect the individuals addressing that? Thank you for sharing that experience. Now we're going to move to Uruguay. I'm very thankful to invite Gabriel Medina, who's working in 2 lenses. One is with the Basel Regional Center for Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the Ministry of Environment. Please share with us your experience.
Okay. Could you hear me in the back? Yeah. Okay, I will try to do my best because my voice is not too loud. So thank you, Jar, and thank you so much to the organizer, to Appen, for invite me to be here. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'm Gabriela Medina, as Bjorn said, and I'm officer of the Ministry of Environment. And as well, I'm the director of the Basel Convention Coordinating Center, Stockholm Convention Regional Center. But this is part of the Ministry of Environment. So I work for the Ministry of Environment. So for a country like Uruguay, that is a developing country, even with it's considered as a country with economy in transition, we continue having a challenge relating to chemical safety and environmental health. And I can say I don't disagree. You were telling before, but from the Stockholm Convention, now there is almost 21 years. Next month is going to be 21 years that this convention get into force. And as director of the center, I don't know if you could, maybe some of you could attend yesterday the GMP program, but we are working on identifications on the global monitoring plan using matrices to see the concentrations on POPs in breast milk, in water, and air samples. And since this convention starts, we can say that there is a decrease of pesticides and there is a decrease of some compounds or chemicals that have been banned. So I think that the Stockholm Convention is a very good tool for us, and we need to use it. And this is important, and thanks to the pressure that civil society is made to the convention, more and more chemicals are listed. And of course, we can think in a short term, medium term, or long term. And when these kind of chemicals are listed, it's not easy for countries to analyze them because the analyses are very, very expensive. The majority of developing countries has no money, for example, for equipment to analyze them, or custom, for example, to control at the border if these compounds are getting inside the country or not. And at least we have a key, we have a tool. So it's very important that we push through the parties to list products. Even I agree with you that it's have been maybe a slow process, but it is the tool that we have. And I think, for example, the first dozen or the dirty dozen that started in GMP, as I told you before, we analyzed breast milk, and the first dozen of pesticide, for example, almost disappear from breast milk. So the convention or the effectiveness of convention is working. We need to improve it, and we need to focus more in children, because this is a problem that we are facing now, because we are talking about human health, and maybe we are not consider children what happen with them, because of course the chemicals are particularly harmful to the children due to their developing physiological system and greater exposure relative to their body weight. So what can we do with all this information? It's not an easy task, and you were there, so you know, to listing products because you need a consensus, and it's not easy to all countries agree on a listing. And another problem that we face is the lack of alternatives. So maybe if we are on a rush to put new additives or change alternatives, maybe we can make a mistake, because some solutions to the chemicals with the years have been demonstrated that they are worst. So we have to be careful and to study very well what we are putting into the market to substitute these kind of additives. So this is what I have to remark. And we have this convention that I think is working, and it can be demonstrated for the effectiveness evaluation. There is a web page under the Stockholm Convention that you can visit, and you can see all the regional reports, and you can see a decrease on these chemicals in our bodies, the breast milk. So at least the Stockholm Convention is complying with the objectives. And what is needed to protect children health? We have the NIPs, the National Implementation Plans, so every country that ratified this convention is obliged to have a plan about who is going to do with the chemicals that are listed. So you have to plan to reduce them and to mitigate that product that become non-intentional or that are produced in non-unintentional way. And how to improve, for example, the NIPs. Maybe plans can be made more robust by explicitly integrated child-specific exposure pathway and health risks. And this would include improved data collection on child exposure in both urban and rural areas, prioritizing funds in products and environmental commonly associated with children, such as toys, school, playgrounds. That is an issue now, because you know that it's quite common to use this plastic carpet for playgrounds with the additives that they contain, and of course household dust. Other thing that we can see in the NIPs, in the plans, that dump site, many of the dump sites, at least in the rural region, and I can speak for my region, where we have been project, we were been working with them, and some open dump sites have been closed 20 years before, 30 years before, even 5 years before. We have open dump site, and you could see families working there, mothers and children working there at picking waste and even burn to collect the metals that they have inside. So this is a very risky practice, and with some of the plants, or the majority of the plants, they have taken into account to close this dump site, and there is a change of technology, and they are changing for landfill. So I think something is done to protect children. Maybe it's not enough. We need to push, but something is in place to act. How we can improve? I talk about NIPS. It's quite important. We need to promoting awareness and capacity building among stakeholders. We need to raising awareness among healthcare providers or health workers, because they don't know how to identify illness that maybe the cause is from POPs. So the medical doctors are not even familiar with that is what that POPs implies. So the medical doctor need to be informed on that. This is crucial. And launch national education campaigns on reducing POPs exposures in homes, schools, and of course, food. Other thing that can make is to enforce regulation on imports and products containing POPs. So some of the banned of restricted POPs, maybe the country has no capacity to analyze them and to see this is present or this is not present because of labeling that it was already mentioned, and I won't be repetitive. But we need building capacity at custom to identify and block POP containing goods. For this, we need labeling, of course, and supporting regional collaboration to harmonize standards and share information on suspected products. This is quite important. The other point is to support safer alternatives and green chemistry, because children are often exposed to POPs through pesticides in agriculture, consumer products, and contaminated air or water. So to minimize this risk, the Stockholm Convention can further assist countries in identifying and changing to safer alternatives in sectorless agriculture and manufacturing, and promoting local research into child-safe or non-toxic materials and practices. The other thing that is quite important is strengthening global and regional cooperations. For countries with limited results, like developing countries that I'm representing one, the Stockholm Convention should facilitate more South-South cooperation for technical training, laboratory development, and information exchange, and promote inclusion of child health metrics in the global monitoring plan. Because as I told you before, the matrices are just breast milk, and this is only the analytes that we can say that go direct to the children. So this is a very good indicator, but we are not focused in children health. So maybe it can be a request for the conference of the party, because you know that the conference of the parties push to listen or push to countries to study what is happening, but there is nothing mentioned about children's health. So maybe would be for the next COP, because for this COP is not going to be possible because we have all the papers that we are discussing now, but could be a very good idea that maybe some party introduce this, or maybe at the statement for the closure, to try to introduce this kind of metrics to see what is happening with the children, because at the reality, we have no information. And in a world that we are exposed to a lot of chemicals, it's quite impossible to say, okay, this is because of PCB, or the reason for this illness is, I don't know, dioxin or furans, for example, because it's a mixture of complex chemicals that came into our products and into our food. So we need to be more strong and to have a strongest message in that. And I thanks to the civil society, because of course, with your pressure and all your claims to the COP, we are moving. Maybe it's quite a slow, it could be considered slow, but we are moving forward. So just for a conclusion, because of the time, we have, like I said, a tool that is this convention in protected children health. There must be more explicit integrated the child health consideration into its implementations. And our countries is an urgent need to elevate children's unique vulnerabilities in POPs-related policies and ensure the national and international actions reflect this as a priority. So continued commitment, technical support, and cooperation under the convention will be a key to achieving a POP-free future for the next generation. So this is all for my part. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gabriela. I think you shared with us some very positive news, was that policies work. The fact that you actually find POPs in breast milk is very, very troubling, but also the fact that POPs listed to the convention, POPs pesticides, are declining, very important. Also, there are alternatives you mentioned, and these alternatives, very important. Right now, this week, it's very difficult. A very large multi-billion-dollar company does not want to find an alternative for UV328, which is to be listed, creating a very big challenge, controversy this week. If one multi-billion-dollar company will not move to the alternative, what will move them? What will move them? And with that, I turn to Mick Tilsbury from the Firefighters Union of Australia, because they have alternatives. They've been very successful. He's going to share with us his experience on this. Mick, please.
Thanks, brother. Thanks, everybody. My name's Michael Tisbury. I'm Assistant Chief Fire Officer at Fire Rescue Victoria. I'm here with my colleague, David Hamilton. He's a commander. We represent firefighters from Australia, New Zealand, North America, Canada, and we've got our colleagues here from the UK, the Fire Brigade Union in the United Kingdom. So we've been coming here for 10 years, and we've been advocating for firefighter safety and community safety, because here are our two vested interests for 10 years. And just recently we saw Korea has just asking for an extension on PFAS containing firefighting foam after 10 years of doing nothing, signing up to the convention, and then kicking the can down the road for another 10 years. Stockholm Convention has been here for 24 years. It's a quarter of a century. For a quarter of a century, everybody has known the PFAS containing firefighter foams kills people, kills firefighters, destroys communities. And a quarter of a century later, we are still hearing the same garbage, lies, misinformation, and myths generally being perpetrated by the vested interest being the chemical companies. It was interesting, Gabriella, the one thing that I didn't hear mentioned is accountability. When are the chemical companies going to be held to account for the damage that they've caused to humans? So one of the first myths we kept hearing was fluorine-free foam does not work. It's not as effective as A-triplet. That's false. Firefighting foams can be contained, and you'll see some of the exemptions in the listings of some of the firefighting chemicals is you can use it for firefighting, because apparently we're immune. We're not humans. we put a uniform on. We're not humans. We're immune to these toxic chemicals that every other person on the face of the planet is adversely affected by. But it can be contained. Look, there's a firefighter, we can't contain it. There's a fire that David and I attended just last year. You tell me how we can contain this. So this was a large chemical fire factory. It's probably one of the largest ones we had about 10 years. That's the aftermath of it. It's our trucks that got damaged from this fire. We had to decontaminate everything. This is what when we pulled up to, that's what we faced. There were 44-gallon drums of chemicals flying through the air. Our number one priority in any one of these fires is firefighter safety, because a dead firefighter is good to no one. And number two priority is community safety, because that's what we're paid to do, protect life and property. And number three priority is the environment. And we try our best, but we can't contain the foam. It's 100% miscible in water. There is extensive water use and extensive fire water runoff. We try to contain it, but it is impossible to do. One stage we had the EPA asking us to stop using water, stop using foam. Could have, that fire would have been going and would have spread to the next adjoining factory and the next one and the next one. The sheer reality is on the fire ground, we cannot do that. I can't tell you how hot that was, but it's hotter than what you could ever possibly imagine. These are the tanks. We were dodging these drums of chemicals flying through the air and trying to fight the fire. It can't be contained. That fire we put out within 8 hours. And that was a massive fire. And that was completely extinguished using fluorine-free foam. The safer alternative. It's not safe, it's the safer alternative to the PFAS-containing foam. Another myth that we've heard along the journey. Fluorine-free foam does not work with salt water. Garbage. Fluorine-free foam has certification from the International Maritime Organization. Equinor and ExxonMobil now use freeze-protected, rehealing, fluorine-free foam on every single one of their offshore platforms. Most major hazard facilities, what we respond to under emergency conditions, when something's usually gone bang and buggered up the infrastructure anyway, are on a dock or a port. We suck our water out of the dock, out of the ocean. So it works. Another myth. Do you know how much effort it takes to debunk these lies? Because they're almost unprovable. People just make stuff up. Chemical companies make stuff up to delay the process of implementing stuff. The fluorine-free foam doesn't comply with mil-spec, military specifications. There was a reason why mil-spec, fluorine-free foam couldn't get mil-spec. Because in the States, there was one little sentence in the military specifications that had nothing to do with the effectiveness of the foam, that it had to be fluorinated. So it doesn't matter how good the fluorine-free foam was, it could not receive mil-spec because it wasn't fluorinated. After successful years of lobbying, that was removed. And since then, we use the Solberg foam, but I'm not here advocating for any particular brand. There are numerous products out there on the market that are fluorine-free and they have military specifications. And this little cracker came out 12 months ago. The fluorine-free foam won't comply with mil-spec for naval vessels. There is no mil-spec for naval vessels. It's military specification, that's it. There is no naval-specific military specification. Oh, this one too. You can't use fluorine-free foam with fluorinated foam and they'll cancel each other out. Well, that's garbage. We tested our foam, the fluorine-free foam, extensively prior to advocating for and changing our trucks over. But it was a 4-year process to change all of our trucks over from fluorinated to fluorine-free. So we were attending fires with a pumper from this station and a pumper from that station. One had fluorinated, one had non-fluorinated. They were fighting the same fires and it doesn't knock each other out. Most major hazard facilities in Australia still, they're dragging the train. They still haven't converted over to fluoride-free. When it goes bang, we're the first ones to get responded to it. We fight the fire using both foams. So that's another myth. Well, vested interests. And it's happened right here in this building on a couple of occasions now. I'm an assistant chief fire officer. I'm an operational firefighter and pretty high up the pecking order. David Hamilton is a commander in Fire Rescue Victoria. We joined the job together. We've both got 35 years experience, operational experience. As soon as I get off the plane coming back from here, I'm back on the gear and ready to respond. We are firefighters in the statutory authority. We have formal qualification and years of training and experience. We represent over 500,000 international firefighters. And we're also here representing our union, which is a registered trade union. We've had people in here pretend they're firefighters. They come up dressed in the make-believe firefighters uniform. They've got more bling hanging off them than Colonel Gaddafi. They have never seen a fire in their life. One bloke ended up being the accounts manager at a private petrochemical facility. The last joker was here last time, gave himself the rank of deputy chief fire officer because that outranked me. Turns out he wasn't a firefighter. He blatantly lied about being a firefighter. He was the health and safety manager at yet another private chemical company. Did 1 week's training as a fire warden and gave himself the title of deputy chief fire officer. We are real firefighters and we represent a real fire service. Manufacturers do not trust them. The chemical companies will lie to you and they will say their products are fluoride-free. They will say it's only in B-class fire, which we thought was only in B-class foam. So B-class foams is what we use on flammable liquids. There's another type of firefighting foam, which are usually used on bushfire type events. But they're for carbonations, they are but A-class fires. We probably made a mistake because we trusted the manufacturers. We didn't test our A-class foam when we converted to the B-class foam. When we tested all our B-class foams. We've just recently tested our drums of B-class firefighting foam because a question was asked. And they said, can you prove there's no PFAS in it? I said, no, we actually can't. We'll go and do it. But here's the MSDS. Here's all the list of ingredients. We'll go and do it. Every single drum that we tested, and that's our high expansion foam, which we use in like shipboard firefighting and factory fires. A-class, supposed to not have any PFAS in it at all, has significant levels of PFAS. So Angus and Chubb's lawyers are running a million miles an hour. We've removed all of the A-class foam and now have gone to a Solberg A-class foam. But we made a mistake by trusting them and not testing that first because we didn't actually think it would even be in there. This is not supposed to be at all. Like I said, our vested interest, a firefighter and community safety. That's it. I don't get too bob out of Solberg or any other foam company for doing what we do. I get paid from Fire Rescue Victoria. That's it. Nobody cares more about firefighter safety than we do, because we're the ones on the end of the hose line. When we tested the fluoride-free foams, we wanted to make sure that they worked, because we're the ones on the end of the line. We're the ones who will die if it doesn't work. So that's what our vested interest in. We are sick of going to the funerals of our colleagues, of our fellow firefighters. And every one of those funerals that we attend, there's never any government regulators there, never any statutory authorities there. There's certainly never any chemical company representatives there who've been making gazillions of the costs of the firefighters over years. It's just firefighters bearing their own. Regulators, legal responsibilities. Our legal responsibilities are for the protection of life, property, and the environment. We take that very seriously. We actually feel really guilty about what we've done, because we've used fluorinated foams and we have poisoned and contaminated the community that we're supposed to be protecting. So we're going to do everything possible. Coming here to the Stockholm Convention 10 years ago, I really thought we could make a change. I really thought we could make a difference. Here we are at the UN. we can protect not only Australian firefighters, but also international firefighters. And when you become a firefighter, it's not a job, it's not a hobby, it's a calling. When you become a firefighter anywhere in the world, you become part of a family. So we don't care what badge you got on the side of your uniform. If you're a firefighter, you're a firefighter. Ratification. Now, my country, Australia, who are signatories to this Stockholm, they've been here and we've seen them and we've worked with them and they've told us they've advocated at the plenary and they pat themselves on the back that we've got this chemical, we've got that chemical listed, we've got PFA, HXF with no exemptions listed. And that's great. But then they go back to our own country and do nothing. I've had a press release ready to go, 10 years, congratulating the efforts that Australia has finally ratified and we can actually ban the use of these PFAS container firefighting foams in Australia. It's still sitting in the drawer, gathering dust. Everything we have achieved, every fire service now in Australia does not use fluorinated foams. Department of Defence no longer uses fluorinated foams. The airports, the international airports in Australia does not use fluorinated foams. And there's not one bit of state or federal legislation assisting that. Everything we have done has been in spite of our government, has been in spite of the regulators. We've forced that because of our doggedness. And so I get it takes a long time, but we're firefighters. We don't have the ability to wait. We're impatient. We're trained to see if there's a problem there, we respond, do a quick size up, we knock it out and we go back, we come up with solutions and we fix it. Working in this world of bureaucracy, it's like pulling your fingernails out one at a time. It is so painful. These are the reasons to do nothing. That's it. They're all the reasons to do nothing. These are the excuses that we've heard over the years to do nothing. PFAS blood testing, particularly concerning firefighters. All you're going to do is increase the levels of anxiety of people if they know what they've got in their blood. We fought for years for the right for firefighters to know what was in our blood. We won that right, but we had to explain to them our levels of anxiety were already increased because we know we've been repeatedly overly exposed, occupationally exposed to PFAS container foam for decades. The other thing they told us, well, even if you know there's nothing you can do about it anyway. Never tell a firefighter something's too hard to achieve because that's what we do every day of the week. So we developed, and it's been peer reviewed and it's been published, a way to get this stuff out of our bodies, and it works. Fire truck decontamination. So we tested all our trucks, and every single one of our trucks. So we were surprised because we changed over so many years ago in 2010, but just about all of our trucks, bar 4, were significantly had significant PFAS levels in it, and we couldn't work out why. We stripped the truck apart and we found the legacy contamination was the issue. So we developed, and we went to scientists, we went to experts, and so there's nothing you can do about it. It's a forever chemical. You can't get rid of it. You're going to have to swap over your trucks. I didn't fancy going to my chief and asking for funding for 200 brand new fire trucks. You would have thrown me out the door. So we pulled a pumper apart and we developed a 32-stage process to decontaminate our trucks, and every single one of our trucks now is below 70 parts per trillion. We have spent millions of dollars on that. We will give that away for nothing. Everything we have done, we will share and give it to anybody who wants it for free. Because like I said, a firefighter is a firefighter, community is community, and it's yours for free. We got told by, once again, vested interest, and even if you do get a short level drop, there'll be bounce back, so it won't work. We've tested our trucks, so we did that 5 years ago. We've tested them all, and not only has there been no bounce back, there's been further reductions. We're now working on remediating our fire station and the surrounding properties, because most of our fire stations are in residential areas, and we have inadvertently contaminated our neighbours, the people, the community we're supposed to be protecting. We're now spending a fair bit of time and money remediating those fire stations. But we got told don't worry about it because it's everywhere. Well, it is. But that doesn't take the responsibility of what we've done. So far we've transitioned to our fluoride-free foam. We built a brand new training facility using safe work practices. It still gives firefighters the level of training they're required to be firefighters without killing them on the way. We've got new appliance and we've decontaminated all our appliances and also the equipment, like there's something like 600 kilometres of hose we've decontaminated. We've come up with a blood PFAS treatment to try to undo the damage that's been caused to us and those affected communities for over the years. And we're now doing investigation testing and remediation work. These are some of the results. There was no argument at all that our firefighters had a higher toxic load of PFAS in their body. We've gone through our testing, so we knew we had an issue, so that's why we come up with a solution. We partnered with Macquarie University and we found you could lower your PFAS blood levels significantly over a small period, a 12-month period, via plasma or blood donating. It's been published and it's peer-reviewed. And even though there's a fair bit of pushback, that can be downloaded free of charge. Because unfortunately, a lot of the communities who have high levels of PFAS levels, they come from a lower socio-economic background. And I didn't care how fancy the publication company was. I couldn't care less if it was published on the back of a cornflakes packet. We just wanted to publish and peer reviewed. But the criteria was it had to be freely available to everyone. And it is. Like I said, we're not bulletproof. Just because we wear a uniform doesn't make us superhuman. We know that we forego both quality and quantity of life to protect the community. We have unavoidable exposures and avoidable exposures. PFAS exposures for firefighters is 100% avoidable. The other stuff is unavoidable. PFAS being an endocrine disruptor makes us more vulnerable to those unavoidable toxins and dioxins that we're exposed to every single fire we go to. We're actually here because we need your help. We need your help to protect us so we can continue protecting you guys. And I know it's hard. So is fighting a fire. There's an interesting point that you raised about the lack of awareness in the medical community. 100% there is. You can go to your doctor and ask for a PFAS blood test. They won't know what you're talking about, let alone by trying to work out to interpret the results and what you do about it. We've actually employed doctors who know about it, and they've now written clinicians' advice for other doctors to be able to interpret that. We will give that to you for nothing. It's another thing. Everything we've done, we will share. We're willing to share it to whoever wants it for free of charge. We know that it affects firefighters. We also know it affects our kids. It's an endocrine disruptor. It biomagnifies. It's one of the few chemicals that actually increases as it goes up the food chain. We know that it's found in breast milk. We've got, David and I have got wives, we've got children. It rips our heart out knowing that the choices that we've made to be firefighters essentially put them at risk. We know that PFOA is now a Cat 1 carcinogen. We know PFOS is a Cat 2, and that'll become a Cat 1 carcinogen. We just see a firefighter recruit course. There were 14 candidates on the course. So 14 civilians training to be candidates on that course. Out of those 14, they got through, they did all the training. Out of those 14 candidates, 12 of them ended up having children with, and I'm talking severe deformities, 2 of which ended up losing their lives. They lost their lives. They lasted for 2 years. That's unacceptable. When we die, we leave children fatherless or motherless. We know it's a reproductive toxin. We know a lot of firefighters have to go through IVF to be fortunate to have kids. We know that it reduces but also our kids because of the PFAS levels. response to vaccines. We know it become, the evidence has shown lower birth weights. We know there's increased levels of miscarriage. All because a chemical company wants to make $1 billion. And they never get held to account. It's wrong. Because 3M knew, they knew in the 70s that this stuff was bad. And they did it. And they're not being held to account. If you or I did that, if we knowingly went out there and poisoned people, we'd be charged. They seem to be immune. But it's time that changed, because that will send a very powerful message to not only them, but every other chemical company in the world. Actually, how about you test your chemical to make sure it is safe before you put it out there in the market? Rather than 30 years of fighting to prove that it's not safe, to get you to withdraw it off the market. The next research we're about to do, and hopefully by the end of this year, we'll work out how to do it. We know our turnout gear is full of PFAS. What we don't know is whether it gets into our body. Unfortunately, there is no viable alternative for the PFAS-free turnout gear at the moment, but there will be. And it will be when there's enough pressure put on the manufacturers to actually do it. We've just commissioned, in partnership with Deakin University and Professor Luana Main, not in a laboratory, in the real world, to see how much of that PFAS on the turnout gear actually gets into us, which will then put pressure on the manufacturers to produce some turnout gear that will give us the thermal protection that we need inside those fire events without lowering the standards. That's been the argument at the moment. Well, we just lower the standards, we'll be right. It's probably only costs a couple of firefighters their lives. Well, that's okay unless you're one of them. So we're going to do this research, and once again, we will share this. We'll make this publicly available with everybody to see whether it actually gets into us. And in the meantime, we're assuming it does. So we've got some processes and procedures in place that our firefighters now use to only wear it, to limit our exposures to it, and only wear our turnout gear when we need it for the thermal protection. This stuff that we wear at our station, where it's got no PFAS in it. When we do road rescue, industrial rescue, or emergency medical response, we've got overalls we wear because we don't need that thermal protection, so it doesn't have the PFAS in it. Our wildfire gear, we don't. The most of the PFAS, there's 3 layers on our turnout gear. There's the outer shell, thermal barrier, and the moisture barrier. Most of the PFAS is in the moisture barrier. We don't need that when we're fighting bushfires, and the weight and the heat of that thing would kill us anyway. So this is where we're going to next. Advocacy. This is what makes me sad. I've lost count of how many parliamentary inquiries I've been to, federal government, Senate committees here, because we thought we were making a difference and we thought we could affect change. We thought that the regulators and governments would back us. We don't think that's the case. So this is our last time coming here, and we're just going to focus attention on just doing it. I'm not going to ask permission anymore. We're just going to do it, and we'll force people to do it, and we'll force companies to do it. And if we've got to use litigation to sue the bejesus out of whoever, we will. But we're not giving up, but it just seems like too slow and laborious. Like I said, we're firefighters, we're impatient, we're just going to get it done. And then the legislation will catch up at some later stage, hopefully. So like I said, I just want to finish. Don't let perfection become the enemy of good. Because what we've found is a lot of reasons to do nothing is because you can't get 100% eradication. 90% reduction is better than 100% of doing nothing. That's what seems to be the case in some jurisdictions now. Once again, I just want to say, every process, policy, and procedure that we've developed, we will give to whoever wants it free of charge. All I can just say, just do it. No more excuses. Just, it can be done. There's safe, viable alternatives. Just do it. Thank you very much. That's it.
Nick, thank you so much for everything that you do and your union and your colleagues who joined us. The fact that you take time to come here and travel, I'm very sad that it's the last time that you're coming here. But what you've shown us is that there are alternatives. And what it's showed us too is taking firefighters who run into the house when the house is on fire to save, they're trying to remove toxic chemicals to put out the fire. They're also going into a house full of toxic chemicals and plastics that is being mobilized, and they're really looking out for your health. So if the alternatives are there, how do we overcome that? And how do you really begin to put pressure on these very large companies? And how do public policy makers look out for the challenge? Now, I do recognize this has been a lot of information from the science space to the Arctic, Africa, to Asia and Latin America. It's been quite a global conversation here. And I also, I would say this, because the time is late, I'm going to offer 2 questions from the floor, and then we can have what we call very private and intimate Q&A, meaning we can break and you can also come up to the panel members to ask them questions as well. So if there's 1 or 2 brief questions, I'll go to the floor. I see one here. Please, briefly.
I want to give some hope. So I wanted to talk about global monitoring program. Really, the effectiveness of the Stockholm is good, but we need more power. Really, with global monitoring program, before it, we haven't any data. Now we have, and we have accurate and data for air, water, milk, and now we have for soil, for fish in our country. So I feel that we are in a good way, but we need more push only and more hope, and ask God to help us. Thank you.
Thank you. The questions from the floor. Yes, we also do have Dr. Jean Coffrey online as well. And I do see another question here from the floor, please. Please, yes.
Yeah. I just want to know if you try to file litigation to protect yourself and your family.
Yep.
What's the result of?
4 years, we prepared a joint litigation against 3M. It was going to be a dual. It was going to be a dual jurisdictional litigation against 3M. So in America, we engaged Robert Billett, who's a successful litigator in the States, and at the same time we had a team ready to whack 3M with in Australia. At the very last minute, I don't know why, our attorney, because remember I'm a state government employee, our state attorney general directed me not to proceed with it. That's probably all I can say on that. I'm probably not last you're going to hear about it. I don't give up, but.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you. Well, I appreciate everyone's time online from around the globe here, this conversation. Maybe I leave you with this closing question to think about, which is all this harm that was made visible today is who pays? Who pays? And then the next question is why delay? Why delay? So hopefully that can motivate people into action to move this need to eliminate some of the worst chemicals on the planet and to think more broadly, who pays, who is responsible for this toxic mess on our planet. And with that, I'd like to thank all of our panel members. I'd like to thank everybody online and thank everybody in the room today. Thank you.
Thank you.